Hi, this is Mitchell Levy, and welcome to Student Lifecycle Management, a series of thought leadership interviews that Hobson's is putting on the marketplace. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. And so let's get rolling. Let me introduce you to the VP of Marketing at Hobson's, Chris McNamee. Chris?
Hi, Mitchell. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to talk about student lifecycle management, something Hobson's has been talking about in the market for about 2 or 3 months now. And so we're excited to share that information with everyone joining us today. And also, I'd like to introduce one of our clients at Hobson's from Tiffin University. This is Justin. Justin, I'd like to introduce you, but also have you introduce yourself and tell all of our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. I'm Justin Schlenker, and I'm from Tiffin University. We're a small private school in Ohio, about 125 years old, and located in a small town, typical college setting, and we're trying to do a lot to embrace the student lifecycle management concept. My department within the university, we bridge a lot of different areas where we handle students from when they first come into the college to almost to the point where they leave. So we try to do a lot to make sure that the student is really handled well the entire time.
Great. I think that's a little bit more about what we wanted to talk about today. Exactly what we've been talking about, like I said, in the market. For us, we affectionately call student lifecycle management SLM, so you'll probably hear me say that. It's a lot easier to say than that long phrase. But we've been defining student lifecycle management kind of, from pre-prospect all the way through graduation. And there's lots of phrases in the market for it, but how would you identify student lifecycle management? What's the concept like for you at Tiffin?
Well, for us, it's really joining all the different aspects a student might see when they're going through university. I think traditionally a lot of schools have kind of compartmentalized handling of their students to where you'll have a isolated admissions area, and then you'll have maybe an academic area that deals with the student while they're enrolled, and then as they graduate and move on, they might deal with a career services or the alumni department.
Right.
We traditionally call it the funnel, or we don't really have a name for it. We didn't previously. But it's really just the entire time you have any sort of relationship with the student, which I think most universities like to keep a relationship with the student for as long as they possibly can. Right. It's really just looking at the student, see how you can help move them along at any phase of their life.
Yeah, I agree. It is about relationships, and it's kind of about the experience that a student has at each interaction point with you at the university, because there's lots of people talking to them during every stage that they encounter at university, and we've really been talking about what's the effect of that engagement and keeping that relationship with the student. What do you think are some of the positive effects for an institution when they're able to engage and keep that relationship going?
Well, I think it really just increases that individual student's odds of success, and it's always good for a university when a student makes it through, completes the program, and then moves on to something where they succeed in life. So for us, it's making sure that student has a coherent message the entire time they go through, and they're not, hopefully not being tossed around to different departments that might give them different messages, and that way both the student knows what the university intends for their path to be while they're here, and we also know what the student is trying to achieve.
Yeah.
The university and the student on the same page.
That's really where we find a lot of our clients ask for help sometimes is what is it in the mind of the student? What should the relationship be like with that university? And what do you guys think, like in the minds of students, what are students looking for when it comes to establishing a relationship with a university?
Well, I think for us it changes quite a bit. We have a kind of a split population. Since we are a small traditional school, we have a decent population that's your traditional student. They come in as 18-year-olds. They move, away from home the first time, and they're on campus. And for those students, it's just really finding how do I adjust to this first being away from home.
Yeah.
On top of that, we might have a student coming from a large city where there's unlimited options to do on the weekend. Now they're coming into a small town in rural Ohio where that's drastically decreased. So it gives us a chance to connect with them and show them all the activities they can do and things like that, as well as kind of keeping their academics and athletics in line if we can.
Yeah.
Any other extracurricular activities they might be doing. For our online population, which is an equal part to Tiffin University, it's really helping like the adult and part-time students manage both their normal busy life. We might have a lot of 30 to 40-year-old people trying to balance a hectic job and several kids.
Yeah.
Part-time, so it's trying to find them the easiest way to get through, well, not the easiest, but I guess the most efficient way to get through their curriculum, and making sure they hit the proper benchmarks and using all the tools that are available to them to get through that program. So it's just a kind of a balance to make sure that we're helping the student do everything they can to get through that program while still accomplishing everything else they want to at the same time in life.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part about this whole student life cycle, because students come in at so many different points and their needs are different. You talked about non-traditional as well as undergraduate. That's different. Graduate students have different needs, and it requires the university to have lots of abilities to connect with them depending on where they are. I know that we talk a lot about non-traditionals kind of being even more representative in the student population now, and they come with a lot of different needs, like you talked about, kids and jobs and that kind of stuff. But that's why I think that SLM is so important, because if you're able to keep track and keep that relationship going with that student, it kind of doesn't matter where they enter the life cycle as long as they keep progressing forward.
Right, and it also just helps us manage our communications with those students, because I think sometimes it's hard for that adult or non-traditional student to feel like they're a part of the university.
Yeah.
They might get all sorts of communication, emails, things like that are tailored to that 18-year-old first-year student. Yeah. And I think sometimes that can actually alienate them more because they feel more out of place.
Right.
By really tracking what we're doing and identifying those relationships, we're able to tailor messages customized to those different populations and hopefully help each different type along even better.
Yeah, I think, and let's be honest, 18-year-olds don't read their email anymore either. So
that's very true.
So you're really probably looking at different ways to communicate with them, even social media or using text messaging and things like that, even when they've already become students. A lot of times what we... Oh, sorry, Mitchell.
Speaking of text messaging and other forms of communicating, for those that are listening, if you take a look at, or if you could see Justin's screen, what's interesting there is he's got the dragons in the background, and he's got a nice banner of Tiffin University. And if you look at Chris's screen, her bottom third not only has at Hobson's, but also the # Hobson's SLM. So if you want to participate on Twitter, either now or go back over time and take a look at the Twitter messages, go to # Hobson's SLM. Sorry, I just thought this was a good time to interject that.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And we've definitely been using that. There's a lot of resources you can connect to with that hashtag too, so I'm glad you mentioned it. But yeah, Justin, just when we talk about different forms of communication, it's always usually in the recruiting and the prospecting stage, but that's even more important when students come into the university and you're continuing to connect with them. Why do you think do you think that's a little more difficult or less established when students actually already enter the university? Do you think that they are, we kind of lose them once they get there?
I don't think we lose them, but I think a lot of times we can maybe neglect some of the areas where one of the things we try to do is keep official communications going to their official tiffin.edu email address.
Okay.
There's a lot of times where the students aren't going to be checking that every minute of the day, whereas they might be checking some other form, and so we try and keep our other outlets open, so if we had an activity planned out and it got rained out, we can post that it's being relocated or moved to inside the student center and things like that, just to speed along that communication, because if you're depending on them reading their email or some other slower method, that they might miss everything.
Right,
Kind of funny how email has now become similar to what postal mail was, where people think that's too slow to respond to, but
I know.
people don't want to check it.
They don't. It's crazy. It's too much of an inconvenience to go check your email inbox.
Right. So they might only check that once every 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. In your mind, where we're talking a lot about communication, where do you think the relationship actually begins with a student and a university? Where do you guys see most students begin to engage and actually have some recognition about Tiffin?
Well, I think for us, it's just that first time that student expresses any sort of interest in Tiffin University. So if they fill out an inquiry card or they even give us a call, I think it's our responsibility as a nonprofit school to really help them achieve their goal, whatever it is. If it's coming to Tiffin University, hopefully we'll get them into one of our programs here, but we might not be the right fit for them. They may be looking for an academic program that we don't offer, but I think it's still good for us, just as part of the education community, to help point them in another direction to where they could complete what they're looking for. So
that's an interesting concept, because a lot of times we focus on let's get our enrollment numbers up and and so why do you think it's hard or sometimes a challenge to find students that are exactly the right fit? Sounds like you might do things a little differently. You might say, hey, and recognize we're not the right fit for you, but let us get you to a resource that is. But why do you think it's difficult for universities to find the right fit or the right student for each university?
Well, I think a lot of that is on the student, and not in a bad way. It's just a lot of time they're younger and they don't know what they're looking for yet. So that, they might have some ideas, some interests, but it's not really connecting with what they do want to achieve.
Right.
That would be our responsibility, to help go in there and work with the student to find out what they really want to do and keep them moving forward. Because what they think they might want to do isn't necessarily what they should be doing a lot of times. They might have funny ideas or just a hobby that they want to pursue. And it's good to have any sort of interest that you can go forward with, but a lot of times it's hard to find that match when you're 17, 18 years old and say, this is my life path right now.
Yeah, a little less focused when you're an undergrad, I guess, when you're trying to make those bigger life decisions. Maybe a little more zoned in and focused when you're an adult and you might be coming for extra courses, or you're a graduate student and you know exactly what it is that you want to pursue for an advanced degree.
Right.
Yeah. So when do you think that universities actually stop their relationships with their students after graduation or through their certain period of time through alumni communications?
I don't think it ever stops. I think anybody who's went to college still frequently gets things in the mail saying, hey, come back to university or give us money. But I think slowly over time you lose touch. It's just like any old relationship where it might be hard to keep your contact information updated when someone moves.
Right.
So there becomes that void there where you don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to be a little more aggressive in that aspect of keeping the relationship going.
And sometimes that's easier to do when you've established those strong communication pieces up front, right? If a student used to seeing or hearing from the university all through their life cycle or all through the stages at which they engage with that university, sometimes it becomes a little bit easier in those alumni communications as well.
Right. And our alumni development office has done a good job lately of trying to build functions in various cities, different locations, and then that will go out on our Facebook and Twitter information. So even if we don't necessarily have current contact information for that student might be following us that we don't know about, and then come to that function or send us an email saying, hey, I want to be a part of this list. So back in touch that way.
The beauty of social media and immediate connections. So we talked a lot about kind of different stages. What are you guys doing to connect all of those stages? What are some of the best practices that you guys have from, let's say, recruitment and admissions through enrollment and your financial aid offices, and then all the way through student services and eventually graduation and alumni affairs?
Well, one of the things is we just try and keep communication very frequent. When you're working with one of our admissions representatives, we'll try and talk to you as much as possible and give you everything you need to know about financial aid and all the other aspects of coming to the university. We try and educate our admissions representatives across the board so they can hopefully answer most common questions that students might have. As they move on to becoming students, that transition, we try and keep our academic advisors kind of in close collaboration with our admissions representatives so that we keep a close, coherent message there. Another thing we're doing is kind of modeling off a success we've had in our online area, is where we've assigned advisors that aren't necessarily academic advisors exclusively, but they are just, in general, student advisors to all sorts of different things, questions that student might have. And so when that student has a question about financial aid, they can first talk to their advisor. Or anything, the graduation application, when they need to get this form in, or if they want to change their major, they know they have a first person to talk to. They can hopefully be a one-stop shop, or if not, redirecting that student to the specific area if it's a more detailed question. And we're trying to move that concept into our traditional undergraduate area. So when there's a student on campus that has a question about something, they don't know if they should go to their academic advisor or a person in student affairs, we'll kind of have that first line of defense where they can come, talk to a person, get some answers, or be redirected to the proper area and kind of be handled. That way we can follow up with them and make sure their problem or question's getting resolved.
That's a really interesting concept. I think that's super helpful for students. How are you training those people? Are they just going through and kind of getting all the information that they can, or what? Do you have a process for them, and do they have to pass any kind of tests or certifications or anything like that?
They don't have a test, but I think all of us here on the staff work closely together, so we like to know what the other departments are doing, and we, of course, have our weekly or bi-monthly divisional meetings, so we kind of keep on tabs with each other, and we'll do cross-functional trainings to make sure we know what's going on, just keeping the lines of communication open internally, so everybody knows what we're doing. We try to keep a lot of that. These functions are I'm part of the enrollment management division, so that's all. A lot of it's managed within one division.
Oh, good.
But, if it needs to go involve athletics, we've got a lot of people here that we're not too big of a school where everybody doesn't know everybody, at least on the staff. So it's an easy way to find that connection. But I think it's a lot easier for the student who, coming here doesn't know everyone to have one first point of contact. And I mean, we're not going to know everything, but we'll usually know who will know everything.
Exactly. At least where to go.
Yeah.
I think a one-stop shop it's interesting, and it's definitely something that students, even adult students, probably appreciate. And you said it came from your online program, so I'm sure they're not on campus. They can't walk into their academic advisor's office and say, where do I go? So they really need a kind of a one person to say, I'm okay with going somewhere else. Just tell me where I need to be. Mm-hmm. So that's good. That's good. What do you think? We're seeing a lot of changes, and I'm sure you read all the education journals and publications. What do you think about this kind of movement towards less of let's get our enrollment numbers up and let's get our completion numbers up? Or I know retention's been a focus for the last 5-6 years, but now there's a lot of talk about funding based on completion rates and graduation rates. What do you think it is that universities really need to keep an eye on to make sure that they're aware of what's going on and how they can best meet the goals of their completion and graduation rates?
I think it's really just making sure that student is involved in whatever they're doing, whether it's their extracurricular activities or their athletics or just attending a lot of events on campus, just making them feel like they're at home and part of a family or an organization, make them feel a part of the university. In our online world, it's also just the same thing, just keeping them involved. I think when you're a student that's living in Wyoming and taking a class in Tippin, it's hard to feel like you're part of that campus. So we've got to kind of a lot of times reach out to them to say, hey, we're still here. Don't forget to check back in. So I think that's where our academic advisors come in, where they'll be the ones to proactively reach out. You can just give them a call once a week, see how things are going, and
Sure.
we'll work with the instructors to see how they're doing attendance-wise, make sure they're coming to class, even in a virtual world.
Right.
So it's just that little bit of extra outreach that I think can make a big difference in keeping that student moving forward.
Yeah, we hear that a lot about, if a student disconnects, then that's a red flag, and it's an alert to say, hey, this person might not have come to class, or this person may not be, as involved in their student organizations as they used to be. I think online has really given us a very interesting dynamic to start connecting with students, and even using like technology like this that
Right.
we're using, in the Hangouts. Could you start using those kinds of things to make students feel more a part of your campus, or at least more a part of the relationship they have with their advisors?
Mm-hmm. And in the on-campus world, that student can, similar to the other areas, they can wander into the library and they can talk to other students and do an academic advising. That's a lot harder when you're online.
It sure.
We've had some good technology-based tools, online tutoring softwares, and just additional help like that. We just want to make sure that that student knows exists.
Yeah.
Because if you're having trouble, it's a lot harder to find those resources. So we try and
We've-
identify the problems early and help them.
Yeah, I was going to say we face the same here when we have remote employees, and it's the same kind of thing, just to make sure that everyone's connected in with what's going on in the office. Same thing. Make sure everyone knows what's going on campus.
Yeah, because it's it is a different world for that student, and sometimes people might forget that that person logs out of their online class. That kind of severs the tie right there with the university for the time being.
Exactly.
You have to open it back up frequently, make sure they're feeling involved.
Yeah. What do you think that we in the education industry, what do you think it is that we need to do that we haven't done yet? That's a loaded question.
That is a loaded question.
It's wide open.
There's a lot. I don't know. I think we can be better at is evolving to help finding new programs that are going to be the careers of the future, and making sure we're keeping our curriculums updated and just how we function as universities and in the education community, because we don't want to be stuck 30 years behind what's going on in the real world, so to say. So we need to make sure that we're constantly looking what that student wants to do after college, and making sure we're adapting well to prepare them for that.
Yeah, that's so important. And like you were saying, sometimes 17 and 18-year-old undergrads don't know what that is, but sometimes their parents do, right? And they're sometimes paying the bills, and we hear a lot about the return on investment for students, that students are becoming more consumer-based, and they really want to know what they're going to get for their tuition dollars. And I think some of the things that you mentioned are really interesting. Being able to talk to a student about updated majors and the latest technology or the latest curriculum, faculty research, all that stuff, they're all selling factors or ways to say to a student, you would fit in here if you want to do X after your university stay. So we're beginning to hear a lot about institutions. It's a less of a focus on geography and where you're located, and more of a focus on what can we give you after your degree. And I think there's a lot of people that are talking about that topic in the student world too.
Right. And I think also something that maybe wasn't focused on as much in the past is even trying to help those students graduate early.
Yeah.
As the rate, college costs are going up, it's a big help to a student to cut off one semester of tuition if they can. And
Exactly.
less revenue money for the university up front, if we get one more student now using their degree successfully and telling their friends or their friends' kids about Tiffin University, in the long run, that's going to benefit us.
Yeah. And successful alumni are a back-end revenue stream too.
Right.
For sure.
It's really about thinking about the bigger picture, not just that, one small, they can go another semester.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's the one thing I feel like our industry also needs to do is just open up the lens a little bit and say, you know, let's not just focus on enrollment. Let's not just focus on completion. Let's focus on the value that both of those things can bring to the front end of a student's life cycle and even to, you know, graduation on through gainful employment. So those shouldn't be mutually exclusive. They're definitely things that can help each other.
Yes, definitely.
Good. Yeah, I just wonder if there's anything, I mean, I could sit here and talk for hours probably about the benefits of student life cycle management and how all of this, you know, translates to institutions and resources, but how are you using your resources differently today with all this in mind than what you've been doing in the past? Are you doing things a little bit differently besides like the advisor program? Are you using technology in a different way, or are you looking at, you know, possible ways to do things differently?
Oh yeah, we're always looking for ways to do things differently, whether it's a different software product or some sort of outside service that possibly can help us. As a small school, we depend on partners like Hobson's to help build us up because we couldn't build such an infrastructure on our own.
Sure.
So, you know, when there is a product offering, we like to look at it and see how it could help us.
Yeah.
I can't say that we've made some ever drastic change in the products we're using or the way we're using, but we're constantly reevaluating the tools we use and tweaking and evolving. I think we have kind of, my area really focuses on the data end of things, and we have our student information system, and then we have our Hobson's products that we use kind of for the communications front. And it's really keeping those two running in sync and using other tools where we're actually keeping notes and logging the students' information so it's available to our advisors and so they can have that quickly at their fingertips. When
Yeah.
they hopefully identify if their student's going to run into a problem, they can see that, you know, the student had this problem back 2 semesters ago, you know, you might want to make an adjustment now to, you know, get them back in a different program, or even, once again, just talking to them. That's the most important thing that keeps them going.
That was not my setup for Hobson's products, but thank you.
No, it fit right in. And hey, and for those of you who are watching the bottom of the screen, you know, instead of me sort of getting put on pause where I timed out, I actually got booted off the system. So fortunately, it kept going on, and technology is grand. And so, but this is the right time, Justin, for me to say, is there anything that Chris didn't ask you that you should be talking about? And by the way, for the time that I was on the air, it was fantastic, and then I lost about 10 minutes, so I apologize. But you guys obviously kept going, so good. So Justin, is there anything that we didn't ask that we should have?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot. I don't have anything on my head right now that I wanted to bring up other than it's, you know, how do we keep evolving to help, you know, finding new pieces of information that we want to identify the students, you know, different things that might be red flags that could. So it's what we're constantly doing is, you know, not trying to be the big brother approach, but we're doing just like all the big companies do, trying to record as much data as we can on the student and see how that helps us identify what path they're on.
Nice, and obviously keep them happy, keep them moving forward. You know, do the right thing to get more students and make sure they're happy along the way.
Right, and yeah, there's no real answer. There's no, you know, perfect way to do that, but just keeping in touch with the student and doing everything you can to make a solid effort to see them succeed.
Got it. Thank you. And Chris, this was a great first thought leadership interview. Is there anything that came out of this for you? Anything that you want to add that you think makes sense? And then of course we want both you guys to say how do we reach you? But Chris, is there anything that you want to add?
The only thing that I would add, which I think is a great point, is the role of data. I think Justin brought up a really good point, and we could have a whole nother session on data, and something I'm sure we'll be thinking about later, but data is becoming so important in student life cycle management. It is going to be the backbone of what institutions are able to do and how flexible they can be, and actually the value that they provide back to that back to that student all throughout their relationship with that student, whether it begins in the prospect stage or they move on, like as Justin suggested, if they're not the right fit. Data just helps all of that and enhances the value and the relationship between an institution and student.
Awesome, thank you. So speaking of data, we need one piece from both you and Justin. If people wanted to reach out to either of you or your institutions, how best to do that?
Well, you could email me at schlenkerjm@tiffin.edu, and I'm sorry I didn't have that up on the screen, but you could always visit our website and find my contact information at tiffin.edu, and maybe check out our offerings while you're there.
Beautiful, thank you.
And then for me, you can always check out hobsons.com. It would be great if you wanted to come and check out. You can find me on Twitter at CLM720. That would be the fastest way, but I do check my email, as Justin suggested, is now snail mail at chris.mcnamee@hobsons.com.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you both for a very enlightening session. Great to be here, and we'll see you guys next time. So thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Bye now.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.